You're listening to Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right, well, hello, everybody. Apparently, it's going to be one fan for now. I'm still waiting for Daryl to be able to join us. Unfortunately, he was running late, but, after a certain amount of time, it's like we just have to do what we're going to do. But today, we're actually talking about something that's sort of close to Daryl's heart. He ran across this article. It was actually from July, and just right off the bat, let me start by saying, before I go any further, that I'm actually pretty sick today. You could probably hear it a little bit in my voice, a little bit of congestion, but I got a really bad sore throat. I came down with it yesterday. I didn't really want to cancel. I also knew how much Daryl was looking forward to covering this topic today, because I actually almost called it off. I'm like, no, I don't really want to do that. But I'm not really feeling the best, and, hopefully I don't tear my throat apart trying to talk to you guys tonight. But, if I don't have my usual energy and exuberance, that's why. So, you guys will know. But, yeah, hopefully Daryl is able to join us soon. Because, like I said, he was really looking forward to talking about this topic. And it's actually something that came out a little while ago. It's basically a rumor that was talking about that the Mandalorian Season 4 may actually be a film instead of the normal, what we're used to, the television series. And again, if my thoughts are scrambled, part of it is because Daryl hasn't been able to make it on yet, and I wasn't planning on doing this show on my own. And then the second thing is, I'm actually pretty sick right now. So those two things together are not going to make a very good combination. But you know what? I didn't want to let you guys down. I wanted to thank all the subscribers. We've gotten a ton of new subscribers, actually, over the last couple of weeks or so. So I want to thank you guys if you're all joining us. There's just a lot. We've actually started to do YouTube Shorts now. I don't know if you guys have taken a look at the channel recently, but we got a bunch of shorts up. And so what we're doing is we're breaking up our episodes into shorts that are easily digestible nuggets, as well as we're also going to be doing character profiles. I got the first couple up now. So every day there'll be a short, brief, new character profile. And to be honest, I mean, if you guys know anything about Star Wars, none of this stuff. I mean, there are some that we're going to cover. Like, I think Darth Sion is in there. There's some expanded universe characters. There's other characters in there that actually are not as well known. But, like, the first one we put up was Darth Vader. The one that went up today, I think, was Princess Leia. I mean, let's face it. And it's just like a little YouTube short. It's not some in-depth, thing or whatever. But if you guys want to see us do that, if you want to see us get into more in-depth stuff with each of the characters, we could actually do entire shows that are character profiles. I have no problems doing that. Actually, I think that might be a cool idea. So while I'm waiting for Daryl to jump on, and there he is. Speak of the devil. Thank goodness. All right, you with me?
Yes, sir.
All right, good. Actually, I was going to get to this anyway, whether you were, on or not, because it was a good time-saving device waiting. And then second, Ted Adam Green actually was not able to make it today, but he sent in a ton of chats, like, before the show even started. So I want to get to those, and we could see what he's talking about. So he starts out by saying, I won't make it tonight, but had to chime in early. My question is similar. If you guys had to pick between only live-action shows or only live-action movies for the next 20 years, which would you pick? Now, before we answer that, he's got some follow-ups. So he says, I would pick shows over movies as we get a lot more bang for the buck and more content hours of material. So if we get a wonky episode or even season, it's less negatively impactful. which is of course a good point, right? Because a movie is like 2 hours, and if it sucks, then you're you're basically doomed to you got to wait another at least year to get something else. Where you can have a bad episode, or you can even have a bad series, and another one will come up, within a few months. And so he goes on to say, and we could get more variety of story styles. You like Andor? You get more like that. You like Ahsoka? You get more like that too. So excited to hear what you all in the chat group have to say tonight. And then he concludes by saying, sorry for my bad typing, guys. Fat thumbed a lot of it, but y'all are smart and we'll get the gist of it. Yeah, well, I can't say that I haven't been guilty of that a time or two myself. Now, Dragonfly chimes in and says, evening, fellows. Good evening, Dragonfly. It's good to see you again. As I mentioned at the top of the show, which I'll keep reminding everybody, I'm pretty sick, actually. So, again, if I seem a little bit more comatose than normal, this is a true story, by the way. You're going to appreciate this. I was getting ready to text you and say, hey, you know what? Maybe I'm going to bail out. And then I open my phone to go and text, and I read your text where you're all like, oh, I'm so excited to talk about this topic tonight or whatever. And I'm like, all right.
Sorry.
You know what? I'll push it. Well, and honestly, we do. Look, we got a bunch of new subscribers. Like I said, if you guys haven't seen, I spent virtually the whole weekend creating all these YouTube shorts off of one of our shows. Found some really cool software to do that, actually. So, yeah, there's a lot of... I'm trying to, with the character profiles, they're going to come out every day. I think I have up to, like, next week or something programmed out. I got, like, 60 of them. So, again, the information isn't exactly something that a lot of you guys don't already know, but it's something interesting and it's something cool, right? So, yeah, let's just start this out by taking Ted's question. So, what are you thinking? You gonna do next 20 years? It's either got to be movies or Disney Plus shows.
I'm going to say movies.
Well, let me guess. Is that because it sort of started out as movies, and you think that maybe Star Wars is like best, like that's kind of the best medium for it or something?
That's part of it. But the other part of it is, although, Ted makes very valid points to which I can't disagree with any of them, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, it would be one, I think the time break would be necessary to make sure you can kind of have quality product, hopefully. I mean, obviously by the sequel trilogy, that wasn't always the case. But
What made me laugh like that, man? I might start
I'm
coughing.
sorry.
But you're not wrong, though. You're not. You're absolutely not wrong.
But the other part of it is too, I think that when you look at the movies, one, you have a higher budget, right? So you get, you can
Mm-hmm.
get better actors. You can go to actual sets and have them created. So you're not limited to the volume, which I think in some instances a lot of the shows have suffered from. It's a great piece of technology that has advanced the ability to tell stories, but I think Star Wars is always best when it's in real practical environments where you have, real sand flying around, you know what I mean? And I think that adds a bit of realism to it. It's more grounded that way. The actors have more range and freedom to kind of move around and use their environment to their advantage. And hopefully that will deliver a better product. And like I said, with the movies, you have a higher budget because of that. And then you're going to hopefully get better writers who are going to produce. And it's like, it's nothing like seeing Star Wars on the big screen, like you said, on the onset. It's, that's kind of how most people came to enjoy Star Wars, is generally on the big screen. And for me, of course, not the original trilogy, not until later date, and I already knew what happened. But I did get a chance to feel that sensation when the prequels came out, and I was able to go to a theater and see a brand new Star Wars movie on a big screen for the first time. That was a moment for me, and so I think that also adds to the magic as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably gonna echo a lot of those sentiments, honestly, because you, it's one of those things where, honestly, if they took away the Disney Plus thing, for the last, like, what, 30, 40 years, we've had Star Wars films. And honestly, up until the Disney era, those have been released like every 3 years or something. And then there were obviously big chunks of time in between them. So it's not like we would necessarily miss it that much. And then on the flip side, we've had a time where you've had almost exclusively Disney Plus shows, right? We haven't had them filming since the Rise of Skywalker. So we're sort of used to that now, too. So from that standpoint, I think we could get used to either or. I don't necessarily think that there's a clamoring one way or the other, but I will say that I would agree that, yes, the film way is a better way to go, only because there's actually a couple of things that support that. Number one, the budget, like you said. I mean, I think that if they upped the television budget and they didn't have to depend on the volume so much, like, I don't know if they're dependent on that for budgetary concerns or because of the wow factor. Like, look at what we can do. We could be on this one little sound stage and, we could be anywhere, basically. And I think it's a combination of both.
Yeah, I was about to say, I think it's a combination of both as well.
Yeah, so, I mean, I think it's more at home in the films, and maybe there's a bias there because of the fact that that's how we got Star Wars for decades. On the other hand, Lucas did mean these to be kind of like a Flash Gordon kind of thing. Now, at the time that he was talking about, this is a different era of films. This is when you used to go to the matinee every Saturday and you would see a different thing. It was almost like theatrical television back then, back in the 30s and 40s and even 50s. It wasn't that separation. I mean, before television, even after television, but before it caught up to where we are at now, obviously, you had very much a thing. They used to get their news in the movies. You'd have all these newsreels and stuff. So people were conditioned to go to the theater on a weekly basis to see the serials.
Something, yeah.
I mean, not just something, but the serials, because like Flash Gordon was very much an episodic type of a thing. I mean, it wasn't a theatrical presentation like we think of now. It really was more like a television series,
television show.
Yeah, in the theater, right? So I think from that standpoint, you almost could have it survive as just a Disney Plus show. But, and this is where you made the very important distinction before I had a chance to, and that is you have to increase the budget. If it was only going to be for the next 20 years, that's what Ted Adam Green said. He said, for the next 20 years, we can only have one. I'm going to have to say, okay, I would probably take films just because of the nature of it. It's something that we've been used to. All the reasons that Daryl mentioned and that I chimed in as well. But if you were going to go strictly Disney Plus, that wouldn't be a bad thing unless you didn't up the budget. You have to increase the budget. If you did that, I think it would still be okay. Because like you said, I mean, the very first sentence of your answer was like, look, I can't really disagree with anything that he said in favor of the Disney Plus shows. However, so it's really kind of a mixed bag. I mean, really, that's a great question to start this discussion out, honestly.
Well, if I could add one more point to it, though, the other thing, although you get more content, unfortunately, with Star Wars, what they have been doing a lot of their, it seems like this is their mechanism, is that they kind of string you along, and they may have like, okay, out of 10 episodes, you know, you have your last two be like, okay, this is what the whole season should have been, and it's in a movie, at least you get that. At least you have to make everything so concise. And I think that allows people to really be engaged, and really care, versus like, okay, you give me 3 episodes of fluff or nothing. It's like, okay, I'm changing the channel, and that's the difference. It's like, while you're in the theater, you have to captivate me within this a lot amount of time, whereas I'm subject to that. Whereas when you're watching a series like, Disney Plus, oh, I can pause it, come back, or just completely change the station, or change up to watch something else. It's like, I don't have to care about this, but I paid my money. I'm sitting down for 2 hours, 2.5 hours. Entertainment like this, you have to grab my attention, and it has to be good. And I think that forces the writers, that forces the directors to make sure they deliver. I mean, it doesn't always work, but I mean, I think it more or less than forces the property to make sure that their content is value and quality.
Yeah, well, I mean, I would say too that there's there is though a lot of time. I mean, how many times in a movie have you said, well, okay, it's like 2.5 hours. They really could have cut this down to like an hour and 50 minutes. Because there's a lot of dead weight, there was a lot of fluff. So it's not like movies are necessarily impervious to the
True.
to the whole like filler, right? But like you said though, I mean, you can have entire filler episodes, and
I have an hour of filler when I could just only have 10 minutes of filler. You know what I mean?
well, this
I'll
is
take the 10
why,
minutes.
yeah, and this is why I've been critical of a lot of the Star Wars. It's funny, we got a couple of comments today on our last episode. One guy commented on, like, okay, Ahsoka is just complete dog crap, is basically what he said, and even beyond the first episode and all that. And I don't know if he actually
David's
watched.
alter ego.
Well, I don't know if he watched all of, because he kept alluding to one and how he couldn't even get past it. And of course, that's why I always say, you have to you can't have your first 1 or 2 episodes be bad. And I basically said,
Yeah.
look, I'm 100% on board with what this guy's saying for episodes 1 through 3. Beyond that, though, it starts to really improve. And now, we get episode 7, which is what one of our other regular viewers commented on, where it's like, oh, I loved episode 7. I thought it was great, all this other stuff. And it's like, well, that's basically what we've been saying, is that I don't know why Disney feels. I mean, first of all, I remember when we talked about, hey, this is great. I mean, if you're giving us 6, 8, 10 episodes versus like, say, 22, which is what the seasons and stuff used to be, if you got to pare it down to like 8 to 10 episodes, which is usually the average of these Star Wars shows, I mean, you would think that would eliminate any of the filler. And surprisingly, it doesn't. I mean, surprisingly, you either have poorly written episodes where it's not necessarily filler, it just isn't good, or you have episodes that are completely unnecessary, and you're like, even the good, I mean, there are good filler episodes. Now,
Sure.
There's 2 categories of good filler episodes. One category would be where it would be necessary, where it's filler, but it's like, it's world building. You're expanding. You can make the argument on whether or not it was really necessary, but at least there is something of value there. The other good filler episode is, it's not, you could do without it. It's not advancing the story or anything. But I mean, as a standalone episode, it's good. It's just a waste, So I think from that standpoint, yeah, I'm really surprised that we would get that in these really short seasons. And if they eliminated that, then I could maybe live with a Disney Plus only presentation.
Yeah, definitely with that. Yeah, I think the model now is okay. Let's give them crap. Then we see that they're about to fall off. Let's give them a great episode, and then so it re-engages them. It's like, okay, well, maybe it's about to turn. Then you do a kind of a nice, decent episode after that, and then we give you the gravitas, the big bang of the last two episodes, and now everybody's like, oh, isn't this such a great, thing? So,
Well, and a lot of people, and this is getting a little bit into the Ahsoka discussion that I'm sure we're going to have Friday, but being that we are on, it is Ahsoka Eve, right? I mean, this is the night before the season finale of the show. Now, if you're watching this 2 years from now or something, it's not going to hold as much weight as if you're watching it tonight. But the point being that and this is one of the people that actually said something in the comments from our last show. It's like, episode 7, they loved it and they thought it was great. And they're like, but it feels more like a mid-season finale than it does the episode before the actual season finale. And I would tend to agree with that because it does seem like it's really difficult to envision them wrapping things up in the next episode. Now, again, my personal theory, and I expressed this in the reply, is that I think that what's going to happen is season 2 is what's really is where all the action's going to happen. I think season 1 really is a setup. And I think what you're going to see, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see tomorrow if this plays out or not, but I honestly believe that in the case of Ahsoka, and we'll get to the Mandalorian in a second, this is all related, actually, but the whole idea, I think, behind this is going to be you're going to see a setup of a cliffhanger. It's going to obviously go into the next season, right? Where I don't necessarily believe that everything's going to get wrapped up tomorrow. I really don't. I could be wrong. Wouldn't be the first time. But I don't think that that's what's going to happen. And I think the danger of television is that there's a difference between the television version of cliffhangers and the movie version. The Empire Strikes Back is very much a good example of the movie version. Attack of the Clones, even. There's a lot more stuff to come, and it makes you excited for that next film. But the other thing that I want to point out, too, that you brought up earlier, and I don't want to forget bringing this up, is that you made a very good point when you said that it's the time to come up with really good content. I wonder sometimes if Disney isn't rushing this stuff out. I can't help but think that maybe there's a lot of lazy writing. There's a lot of corners that are cut. I find it hard to believe that with the talent that they have, that they can't come up with this stuff. But I think they're so fixated on the business model of Lucasfilm that they've forgotten about the art. They've forgotten the fact that Lucas didn't care about any of that stuff. He had a vision. Now, look, there's a lot of us that were bashing Lucas, too, I mean, people forget that. People forget the prequel era. You ruined my childhood thing. But the bottom line is, of course, when you look back on it now with all the emotion, you realize, oh, okay, this stuff was actually not that bad. If in the hands of Lucas, you knew that it was pure art. He was financing this stuff himself. He didn't care if you liked it or not. He didn't care if it made money or not. All he wanted to do was make the movies he wanted to make. So whether or not you were on board with a particular film, at least you can trust the fact that the motive behind it was purely art. The problem is you get all these talented directors, writers, whatever, in the mix now, which of course initially excited the fan base. But now that the focus is more the business, the marketing, all that other stuff, I think that now it's almost like the talent is squandered in a way, it's because it's like they're trying to, like you once said, they're trying to manufacture the same success Or is it they just make good movies with good stories and good writing and good acting and all that other stuff? The rest will come. Now, before you answer, Dragonfly says, my childhood was great. Thank you, Lucas. And yeah, I think we all look. I mean, like I said, I think a lot of the people that were saying these things, it was a knee-jerk reaction. You know, there's no way that the prequels were going to be able to stand up to the juggernaut that was the original trilogy. The original trilogy had been with us for like 22 years before The Phantom Menace came out. That's a lot to live up to.
Well, not only that, but it's lightning in a bottle.
Yeah,
Some
true.
things happen like it's the right moment at the right time. It just happened that way. Um, and they had a run. It's kind of like, look at your favorite sports teams, or, look at musicians, they're that's another one. Like where you look at, all right, this era of music, like, okay, if you want to talk about the 80s, it's like, okay, that was just a time where great music was being produced by, these top notch in all genres. It's not just, you could say hip hop was thriving and prevalent, in the 80s. You could say rock was too. A lot of the classic rock songs are from the 80s. You have a lot of great stuff that was done um in a moment in time, and then trying to recreate that now is kind of like, you can't really do that. You kind of have to take what's current, and it's like, okay, what is the foundation of it all though? And I think when you look at Star Wars and that from that perspective, it's like, okay, even George trying to recreate the, you know, original trilogy, it's just like he wasn't trying to do that. He was just trying to finish
No.
out the story.
Yeah,
And he, as
exactly.
always, what he does is that he pushes the envelope, because the same vibe was there. I mean, granted, you know, he pushed technology. We talked about that before.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly, with digital cinema and all that type of stuff. Just no different than he did, in the 70s when he came up with the whole um ILM, and he pretty much had that whole production team, and just the way they created certain looks and certain feels, and they revolutionized science fiction. Just the way it looked. Everything wasn't so put the camera here and the ship goes this. It's like, no, things are following, and you have all that type of stuff. So the storytelling aspect goes beyond just the writing too, and that's a part of it as well. And so I think what we have to look at for Star Wars, what we really need to focus on is like, okay, just don't be cheap. Don't try to, like you said, Eric, cut corners because you're trying to meet this deadline. And it's like, no, like, let's just be good. Hold yourself accountable, hold yourself to the flame, and really look at, what, this is art, like you said, just solid art. And
Well, I
you'll be fine.
promise that we'll eventually we'll get to this Mandalorian thing. Although this is part of it though, because whether they turn the Mandalorian into a film or not, I mean it's kind of a thing, right?
Well, yeah, because they talked about, like, because there's this whole thing where there's supposed to be a culmination of Book of Boba Fett, Mandalorian,
Yes.
and then Ahsoka, and that's supposed to be all one big film
Well, that's the thing,
where
right?
they tie up a bunch of stuff, almost like an Avengers kind of thing.
So back when the writer's strike started, a lot of people were concerned. I mean, we'll get this now, and then I'll wrap in some of the comments I was going to make into this whole thing. Yes, the plan was always to make an Avengers style movie from the Mandoverse that basically features everybody from all the series.
Hmm.
Now, the question, of course, becomes: is it going to be based on, because we know that Ahsoka takes place after season 3 of The Mandalorian. And the reason we know that is because of the whole Moff Gideon comments.
Right.
So there's these different series, the Book of Boba Fett, Ahsoka, they're all happening in the same time period as The Mandalorian. It's a variation on when in The Mandalorian that they're taking place. The idea is that they wanted to do an Avengers style movie, like I said, where it's not just that they're bringing in everybody from the quote unquote Mandoverse, but they're actually tying up storylines with it. Now, the thing is, that was always the plan. So back in like July or something like that, around the time the writer's strike began, and nobody really knew that there was an end in sight. In fact, the Screen Actors Guild, the SAG strike, is still going on. So the writer's strike has been settled. SAG, Screen Actors Guild, that's still going on. So Hollywood is still in this crazy flux right now. Some stuff is back, but most of the stuff isn't, right? So you have a situation where there was talk, and really I don't know why it being a movie would make a difference, but there was talk that maybe what they do is they take what would have been The Mandalorian Season 4, they make that into a theatrical film. And then this original film idea would be a follow-up to that. And of course, one of the questions that we're bringing up, because obviously there was a lot of talk about this over the summer, the writer's strike has been settled. There have even been people on the inside at Lucasfilm saying, no, this isn't a thing. The Mandalorian's going to be a TV series like it always has been. I mean, that's kind of been debunked in a way, but the rumor does spark an interesting discussion point. And that is, if they did take The Mandalorian Season 4 and they made that into a movie, and then, of course, did a follow-up film, which is what the original idea would have been, would that actually be a better move? And that's really going to be where we're going to spend some of the discussion. But the point that I was trying to wrap up in all this, though, is that Lucas not caring about all this stuff ended up making a lot of the right decisions because, again, he put the art before the commerce. And I think that you may not agree, because look, we saw what Lucas's original treatment was for episode 7, 8, and 9. Now, a lot of people focused on those little nano things or whatever that were carriers of the Force or something weird. It was almost like the midi-chlorians on steroids. Okay, that was kind of stupid. However, if you actually look at his treatment, he was going to have Darth Maul be the bad guy. And then Darth Talon was going to be this female Sith Lord. She was going to be kind of the new Vader. You were going to have, I think it was going to be like Jason Solo or something like that. Or then there was going to be, like, Kira was the original name of the Rey character that, ended up becoming. Point is, actually, when you really take the plot for what it was really cool. And may have actually made a better sequel trilogy. And of course, we don't know. Because even the Duel of the Fates that Colin Trevorrow came up with, on paper, looks fantastic. Your original point would be, well, this thing would be way better than The Rise of Skywalker, but, we don't know. Right? Because,
Right.
they can make the film and it could be a disaster.
Yeah, because it's all about the execution of it.
Exactly. Just decisions that are made. I mean, just because something's great on paper doesn't mean. But I guess what my point overall is, you had this whole, 20, 30 years or whatever of expanded universe stories that would have made wonderful films. Now, of course, I could still screw them up. But, I mean, the point is, at least you would be starting with good source material. They didn't do it. So, now you get, and it was funny that Ted Adam Green actually started us out with that question of, would you rather see the, next 20 years of Star Wars releases be Disney Plus shows or films, if you had to pick one? Because really that sort of ties into this topic, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, because we're in a time and place where you have the advantage of and the platform of a Disney Plus where you can not only house your previous content, but then you also create new ones out of it, and then you can continue further or further the story of or take a detour to another side and feature like, okay, let's see what Ahsoka was doing during this time, and leave the films to the big saga. Because I remember that at one point when we first heard about Disney Plus, that was the big question. It's like, okay, is only going to be on Disney Plus now? Are they done with films?
Yeah, it's
Or
true.
are the
We really
saga
didn't
or the
know.
sagas? Yeah, or the sagas? Are we going to have another saga again? We have three.
Well, now
Are they
correct
going to?
me
Is
if
there
I'm wrong.
another?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that
Mhm.
the next release is like a dual release in 2026, right? Like a May and December thing. I know that's on there, but I think 2026 was the next thing. I don't think we're getting anything before that.
I thought it was 25, but maybe.
Well, I don't know. I don't know.
But then
They
they
probably don't
play
know.
the shell game with these dates and
Well,
releases
sure.
so much too. That's the other thing too. It's like, oh no, this has been pushed back, and oh, this is because and I think what happens is like we fell in love with Mandalorian. That was the flagship show on Disney Plus when Disney Plus first launched. That was like the big show that everybody was waiting for. Like on this new platform, everybody wanted to see, the Mandalorian is like this space western thing, and it was awesome,
Well,
absolutely awesome.
Disney
Well
Plus was
done.
built on the Mandalorian. Actually, that's a good point.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. Yeah,
Hmm.
and so it was an awesome show. It delivered everything. It felt like Star Wars. It looked like Star. I mean, it had everything that you really wanted. And then I think sometimes what happens is that people get greedy, and the greed in it's like, oh, okay, well, we can just keep making this, and it's like, well, but you have to keep the quality though, and you have to right size that. You have to give the people, and of course, people are going to clamor for it, but the reason why they're clamoring for it was because it was good. That's the reason why we're clamoring for it. It's because it was actually good and well done, and it felt and looked like Star Wars, just on a small screen. But don't just take for granted of your fans like, oh, because you had a couple of successful seasons of stuff that you can just start have microwaving stuff to us, and expect us to have the same result. It's like, not when you're competing with all these other great shows with tremendous writing that have nothing to do with Star Wars. And so I feel like now this is a great time, and I believe that in the films, this is where Star Wars truly needs to shine and return to being the juggernaut that it is, or that it was. And I think moving forward, I think Star Wars could, you could do your little skeleton crew, and all that stuff is cool, but those films really have to pack the punch.
Yeah. Speaking of which, I didn't see it, but I heard that the Acolyte trailer leaked today.
Really.
Yeah. Like a
Hmm.
teaser trailer or something. So I caught that, and somebody had said, "Oh, the official release probably won't be far behind because there was a leak." Again, I can't help but if this seems like the PBS version of a Star Wars discussion, it's only because my energy level being sick
Mhm.
is a little lower today than usual. Um,
Yes, he needs to take a trip to the back of the tank, and
I mean, it's just one of those things where I'm just like I feel so terrible right now. It's not even funny, but I am enjoying the discussion though. To that end, one of the things that I was thinking, maybe even as soon as next Monday, because the next Monday should be fine. Next Monday we should be live normal time. It shouldn't be a problem. A week from Friday though, I'll be out of town, so that's going to be the first like non-Ahsoka Friday. We'll have to figure out. I'm sure we'll pre-record something. But here's what I was wondering: what might make an interesting topic for Monday, or if not Monday, maybe we pre-record something Friday, because this ties into this discussion, and that is you have the expanded universe that has just a ton of great storylines that, of course, everybody was into.
Mhm.
And it might be fun to actually come up with like maybe a top 5 favorite storylines from the expanded universe that would be good to turn into modern films. Now, you could cheat, right? You could just say, all right, well, 3 of them could be Heir to the Empire, Dark Force Rising, and Last Command. And I mean, that would be valid. But what I would say is, if we go that route, you would combine that into one and say the Thrawn, the Thrawn trilogy, like the Timothy Zahn version of episodes 7, 8, and 9. But because I can think of a few actually that would be good, and we could talk about that. That might actually be a fun topic to do. But I say all this because you have to. I think when you're talking about The Mandalorian Season 4, and of course, we're a little bit, what's the word I'm looking for? Not at odds, but we're a little bit hindered. I'll just say that, because that's all I can think of right now. We're a little bit hindered because we don't actually know the story. Like, we're saying, should it be a movie? And I think that the first thing that you and I would both agree on is, well, that depends on what the storyline is, right?
That's a valid question. Yeah, I can understand that. But I mean, overall, I mean, because that's the thing. It's really, all of this could be a movie.
Well, yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. It's.
But do you know what I mean? Because, like, for instance, like, okay, The Mandalorian Season 1, for instance, I think that actually does function best as a television series. The Mandalorian Season 3, I think, function as a television series. Now, The Mandalorian Season 2, I think you could have made an argument for that being a film.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, like, if you know what the story is, you could say, maybe this would be better presented. Like, here's a perfect example. Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan started out to be a film. Obi-Wan should have stayed a film. For a number of reasons. I mean, obviously the budget being the biggest, but really and it was only 6 episodes, but I think even if you kept that story intact, and I honestly, just full disclosure, I don't know if they actually changed the storyline to Obi-Wan when they changed it from a film to a TV series. I don't actually know. They may have. Well, let's just assume they didn't. If they didn't, then it would have made a far better film, in my opinion, than a TV series. And so, if you're looking at The Mandalorian Season 4, it's almost like, well, if we know what the overall story arc is, then we can determine from that whether or not it would make a better TV series. So I think what I'm saying here, in my own roundabout, sickly sort of way, is I think if we know what the storyline, like if the storyline is more of a cinematic thing, if it doesn't benefit from being dragged out, maybe it would make a better film. If you need more time to develop the characters in such a way where, say, an 8 to 10 episode series would be best. Like, for instance, Andor really was perfect as a television series. You could not tell that the same way in a film. I mean, you could, I guess, but I don't think it would have been as effective as a movie.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, and you're right. There are certain seasons that, even like you said, Mandalorian, where one was more for a film, will suit a film better. Then there's others that would pan out better on television. I think if you're going to do something big, like really huge, then it needs to be on film.
That brings me to my next question, actually.
Okay.
Like, perfectly, which is, we're talking about The Mandalorian Season 4. All the viewers that are watching this right now are watching this based on you guys are talking about The Mandalorian Season 4. So, based on the first 3 seasons, right, where this thing is coming up. Now, again, we don't know the story. We don't, but you have an idea of maybe where they could or should go. Do you think it would be better served as a movie or stay as a TV series? I think that's ultimately the question.
I think when you look at Mandalorian, okay, so
Kind of tough,
season, yeah, it
you
is
know?
really tough.
You could go
Yeah,
either way. I
it's
mean,
yeah, you really can. It's um I like Mandalorian honestly as a TV show because I think as a series just because it flushes out um a brand new character that we're following, so to speak, and we're getting the nuances. Like, okay, we're getting the nuances of Din, and you're doing a lot of world building here, because you're telling the state of the affairs of the galaxy. So, and I think that's really the backdrop of all of this, if we really kind of stop and think about it, because you kind of see that thread woven within all these different series: Book of Boba Fett, Mandalorian, Ahsoka. They all kind of hinge around the development of the New Republic. So, if that's the backdrop, it's like, okay, well, we're trying to develop this whole New Republic because eventually we have to see how the New Republic kind of falls to the First Order, because we already know that the sequel trilogy we have the First Order, and we're like, okay, well, how did that even happen? So this time period we're really just building up the New Republic, and then there needs to probably be some films, maybe, to really show, like, okay, the big takeover of the First Order and how they just kind of came to power.
well, I mean, so there's a lot of interesting things that we can unpack with that. I mean, number one, I think the ultimate thing would be to do these TV shows, whatever story arc they're all telling, because they all take place during the same time period.
Hmm.
So you have Ahsoka, you have The Mandalorian, you have Book of Boba Fett. Now, we don't know if the Book of Boba Fett's going to go another season or not. We really don't. Let's just
Hmm.
pretend that it is. Or let's just pretend that it isn't. And you just have Ahsoka and The Mandalorian. That's plenty.
True.
Then what you could do is you can have them go their story arc. Now, maybe that takes a few seasons. You know, The Mandalorian's like about to do season 4. Ahsoka will have to do season 2, but let's just say at the end of Mandalorian season 4, at the end of Ahsoka season 2, now it makes sense to do a movie that ties
Hmm.
those up. I think that's
Right.
the smartest way to go.
Yeah.
Because as you
Absolutely.
said, and I mean I agree, it's kind of like you have to really stop and think about which medium really serves the storyline best. Um, you have to look at, because when I was listening to what you were talking about, immediately my mind went to the Bad Batch. The Bad Batch would be terribly, it would be a terrible disservice to make that a film.
Absolutely.
That whether
Absolutely.
it's animated or not. I mean, don't get stuck on. I just don't want anybody to get stuck on the fact that the Bad Batch is an animated series, because that doesn't matter. Because you could do
Hmm.
an animated feature too. But
Sure. Like the
whether it's an
Clone Wars.
animated feature, animated, live action, doesn't matter. The point is, when you're just looking at the story of the Bad Batch, because like you pointed out, world building, it's you're showing the entire fate of the galaxy. You have to build all this stuff up. Movies generally are following a character or two or three or whatever it is, and you're seeing the world that you're in through their eyes. Whereas
Correct.
when you have,
Correct.
and you do the same thing, I guess, to a degree. I mean, we're seeing where the galaxy is now through Din's eyes, or some of these other people. I mean, that's true. But I think that ultimately the the TV series gives you time. It affords you time to really flesh out some of these stories. Andor in particular is a good example of that.
Yeah, I think so. The Mandalorian, it's really like I said. I think the whole thing is really to get us to the New Republic. We have to see. Okay, this is after the fall of the Empire. Where to get what's happening in the galaxy before the sequel trilogy? Okay, well, Leia and her crew are trying to rebuild the Galactic Republic, or
Hmm.
and in the midst of that, you have these, outlaws, of course, because now you have no government. So now you have all this kind of, you got some people who have remnants of the empire. You have other people who are, pirates and smugglers, and you kind of have all this underworld stuff going on. And then you have these other people who want to assume power because the big guy is gone, the emperor's gone. So
Right.
it's like, okay, well, how can I get my piece of the pie? And I think that's a very interesting dynamic uh in us for a society if you look at it.
Well, I'll tell
So I
you what
think that's where
makes
we are right now.
yeah, and I'll tell you what makes that interesting. And because this is true to real life. Usually we get all excited like Saddam Hussein, right? He was toppled.
Mhm.
And
Right.
you it's like, okay, brutal dictator, on and on it goes. But what was interesting about that, so one of my friends actually, was from the Middle East and stuff. He pointed out, like, on one hand, yes, he did a lot of brutal, cruel, terrible things. On the
Mhm.
other hand, he was also the only one that was keeping a lot of criminals and things like that from, so there's almost like, and that's kind of how the emperor is. I mean, yeah, it was a brutality and it was, horrible and on it goes.
Mhm.
But then as soon as the emperor's gone, it's open season, right? I mean, now it's
Right.
mayhem. And so now
Mhm.
instead of one really, because this guy kept everybody in line. So there is that. I mean, there's a lot of different things that I think that you can unpack. Let me get to a couple of things that Dragonfly wants to say here. Um, he says there used to be a trend with TV shows getting a TV movie that would conclude the series. I remember that actually. Disney was big into that in the mid 2000s with shows like Lizzie McGuire and Even Stevens, and I do remember that. And look, I mean, this is another point that we actually didn't even touch on. What if instead of a feature film, it was just a 2 hour, you know, Disney Plus feature? Doesn't have to be
Mhm.
in theaters, right? I mean, it could just
Right.
be. It could be. I mean, look, everybody was talking about. We did a show not too long ago, Filoni's Heir to the Empire thing,
Mhm.
where we question whether or not he would remake it, and that would be um Disney Plus's first feature film. So that actually opens the door. I mean, that could be a situation where sure, maybe it's not a theatrical release. Maybe it's all contained within Disney Plus, and that's another thing too. Maybe they just, you could still do same big budget movies. Now, granted, the reason why, and this is true back in the day when you had TV movies, or now you have them streaming, even Netflix, right? A lot of times they'll put these things in theaters because they need that box office return. It needs to make a certain amount of money. It's not going to make the kind of money in streaming that it would make from a theatrical release. Now, of course, if it bombs, because there's other,
Mhm.
back in the VHS days, right? You used to have movies that just bombed in the box office. I mean, they were embarrassments, but they found a second life in VHS rentals and
Mhm.
ended up making like piles of cash through VHS rentals and became cult classics. So, you do have that. Let's see. Dragonfly's got a bunch of stuff he's starting to chat in. Says if they were going to end The Mandalorian, I'd like to see them end as a movie too. I think that's the plan. I mean, I
Mhm.
could be wrong. I don't know if you've read anything to the contrary. I think the idea now they may do one of two things. They may so the, let's just forget about the season 4 being a movie thing for a second. The whole idea was it would culminate into a movie. Ahsoka, Book of Boba Fett, Mandalorian, Avengers style film.
Mhm.
Okay, fine. that doesn't necessarily mean that there wouldn't be a Mandalorian season 5, Ahsoka season 3, Book of Boba Fett season 3. It just means that the storyline up to that point pretty much is
That's
pinpoint.
concluded.
Yeah, it's concluded in this film, and then maybe a new storyline starts in their respective seasons. Or, like you said, maybe the whole thing is just concluded in a movie. Let's see. Dragonfly says Andor is a good example. 2 seasons ending in a movie. Yeah, actually, didn't really think about that, but that's true because, as we know, Andor season 2 is going to be the final season, and it will conclude into Rogue One. And then, of course, he says that happened retroactively. But again, your point still stands. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter that it happened retroactively or if they had planned it that way. The point is that, yes, it concluded in a film. And that's a good model to follow.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like when you look at shows like, for example, Cobra Kai. We talk about it all the time.
Sure.
Cobra Kai is definitely a show that's perfect for as a series because you're developing all these multiple characters into like, and if they ended the series as a movie, oh, it'd probably be phenomenal.
Well, here's
Because
the
we've
thing that's
had
funny, though. This is what's actually kind of funny. Because if you think about it, Cobra Kai started as a film, right?
right,
So
exactly, and
you
they
can
did the
do the
reverse.
opposite, right? You can start the thing as a movie and conclude it as a television series, or you begin it.
Yeah.
You could even do that to where Star Wars could flip the script a couple of times. It could start,
Mhm.
say, what was the one thing that you and I? Well, actually, if you want to be honest, even though it wasn't a sequel, you could say the same thing about Andor. You could flip it around and say it started as a film. Andor began as a movie. He was a
Mhm.
character in Rogue One, and then they did a prequel on him. Now, of course, they can't do a sequel, but you could do a thing to where you make a Star Wars film and then sequelize it solo. That would be the perfect example. They're probably going to do that a little bit with Lando, I imagine. But what they could do is, instead of Solo 2 and 3 being films, they could just make that's what I had always said they should do, because there's a lot there. Let's see. So Dom, ever the
Hi, hi.
optimist. Yeah, I'm waiting for us. Here we go. Took a second to pop in. He said they should discontinue it. Well, I will say this in Dom's defense. If they're not going to put the time and the care into this that George Lucas did, then yes, they absolutely should just stop. It's kind of like you see these artists who are like in their 50s, 60s, 70s who they just don't have it anymore, but they keep touring. They can't
Mhm.
sing, and they're a shell of what they once were.
Falling off the stage and
Or just they're just terrible. And you just sit there and
Mhm.
go, all you're doing is you're dragging your legacy through the mud. I mean, if you stop,
Yeah.
your legacy is protected, and there is a point, and it's legitimate, where you might say maybe it's best to not do this and further drag the franchise through the mud. I kind of like even though, it's too bad that I'm really sick, and that's why this little calm PBS style discussion is actually kind of different. It's sort of like we're dropping Quaaludes over here. But yeah, I mean, honestly, I think that's really the thing, is that they need to just, and I think this goes back to something you and I talked about over and over. If they just have a plan, you know, it's like you have the medium of Disney Plus, you have the medium of films. Just figure out, come up with a project, and ask yourself, would this be better served as a film or as a TV show. And then you have
Yeah.
to further ask yourself, okay, if no matter which one the answer is, does it start as a film and end in a TV show? Does it start as a TV show and in a film? Does it just stay in its respective medium and it never crosses over? I
Hmm.
mean, I don't know. It just doesn't seem like it's that tough to me. Maybe I'm wrong.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's just like you have to look at the particulars. Like, okay, is it world building? Are we fleshing out, like I said, with the Cobra Kai, like where you're fleshing out all these multiple characters and you're bringing in other people to really tell, and what's the overarching story? Like, where are we going with it?
See,
And
this
then
is
at
the
that
point.
point, hmm,
This is the point. You hit the nail on the head once again. One of the things, uh, and I'm convinced that one of the reasons why Cobra Kai is so good is because those guys from day one, before the first episode of season one even premiered, they said, we have an outline of the entire show. We know how it ends, we know when it ends. They did say that there was flexibility in the seasons. They did say that, okay, because that was one of the first things. They said, well, how many seasons is this going to be, right? And they said, well, we don't know.
hmm,
I mean, we know basically the beginning, middle, and end of the story. We could play around with how many seasons it takes to get us there. It could
hmm,
be 8 seasons, it could be 5 seasons. The point
right,
is, we could be somewhat flexible in that regard, but as long as we have advance notice, of whatever, at the time it was YouTube Red, which is now YouTube Premium. Now they're on Netflix. If they ever said, hey, this is going to be the last season, which they did say for season 6, by the way, they
hmm,
can go, okay, cool. They can then, because they could stretch it out as much as they needed to, and it wouldn't ruin the integrity of the show. This is what Star Wars needs to do. Now, obviously, Cobra Kai is its own single universe. Now, they did say that they were going to do spin-offs, and then
hmm,
it will become more like Star Wars, and it'll introduce the same issues that Star Wars has. But if you want to convert this over to a Star Wars thing, all you have to do is just whatever the given project is, whatever time period it is. Like, okay, we're going to tell a Palpatine origin story, and it's going to take place between like this year and this year. It's going to be so many years before Phantom, whatever.
hmm.
Okay, fine. Come up with a definitive beginning and end. First of all, this is where we're starting. This is where we're concluding. This is what's happening in the middle. We have a rough outline. Then decide, is this better suited for television? Is it better suited for a film? Maybe it's both. Maybe what you do is you have a Palpatine trilogy. Maybe seasons 1 and 2 of the show end in the first film. Seasons 3 and 4 end in the second film. So in other words, you have this trilogy of films, but then you have seasons of television that fill in the gaps in between. you know Now granted, I understand the marketing problems with this. It's like, well, you got to find funding, right? You have to
Yeah.
make sure that there's a demand for this. And we're obviously talking as far as just creativity, but you can work that in there. I mean, they have a whole team of people that can figure this out.
Yeah, but it just remains to be seen. I think we just have to see what their plans are um for the rest of the ride. I mean, we could speculate, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of things going on coming off of this strike, and like you said, we still got this the SAG strike going on. So this is really going to be something that we're going to have to just keep an eye on, and just hopefully the powers that be are just really thinking this stuff through, and hopefully the writers, they pick the correct writers to get on board to actually write a great dialogue, and we get directors in there who really can take the realm and take this to the place that we know it can go.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, this is something, obviously, the story is not ending here. We don't even know when the Mandalorian Season 4 is going to... We don't know their target date. We don't know when production's going to start. I mean, this is something, like I said, we wanted to talk about this tonight because it has been a rumor of, are they going to make it a film? Are they going to do a TV series like it has been? What are they doing? So it definitely warranted some discussion. But obviously, this is not the last that we're going to hear of this. And, we'll bring this up again. So again, my apologies if I was a little off or whatever. Like I said, I'm pretty sick. I'm battling this thing. I'm, pulled through, but I didn't want to cancel on you guys because, this is one of my favorite things to do. So I'm probably going to crawl off and die after this thing is over. But, I just wanted to thank everybody. I want to thank the new subscribers, the people that are watching us on Twitch. We don't want to, forget our Twitch followers. Check out our new YouTube shorts that we got coming out. We'll make some off of this episode as well. So that way people don't necessarily have to sit through a 1 or 2 hour thing if they just want to see little bite-sized chunks. So this Friday, it's going to be, tomorrow is the season finale of Ahsoka, which we're all going to be excited to watch. I mean, this is really going to determine. And then so what's going to happen, I'll tell you how this is going to break down. So this Friday, obviously, 11 o'clock at night, we're going to break down the season finale of Ahsoka. And that's going to put a button on season 1. A week from Friday is going to be a pre-recorded show, which is probably going to just be like an Ahsoka series retrospective, right? Because, we're going to be reviewing the final episode next week, and obviously that'll be within context. I'm sure we'll talk about the overall season, but we're going to do like a season retrospective. Like we're going to actually rank the entire and review the entire season a week from Friday. Now, a week from today, depending on how you're feeling, maybe we do a top 5 expanded universe storylines that should become films or a TV series. That might be fun to do. So we'll talk about that and we'll figure it out. But either way, we'll be with you guys live this Friday. We'll be with you guys live a week from today, pre-recorded a week from Friday. So that's the way the schedule is currently looking. Hopefully I actually feel better by Friday. I'm pretty confident that I will, but I'll be a little bit more energetic and with it and jovial. Yeah. Not so much getting through it, but I got to say, I had a lot of fun talking to you guys tonight. It was great chatting with you guys as usual. Be sure to like and subscribe and, join our Discord. There's a bunch of stuff in the comments section. There's a buy me a coffee thing that you guys could do if you're so inclined, want to give us a little extra support. Actually watch as many times as you can and like these little 1-minute YouTube shorts that we got coming up, because apparently now the YouTube algorithm is actually swinging back to live streams now. But for a while, and it's still sort of the case, they're obsessed with these YouTube shorts. We're making some. It would really help the channel if you guys just watch those and maybe recap and comment on that stuff. That would be great. So until Friday, I'm Eric Vansel.
And I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.